everybody to this session of Optimyze Ed Podcast. I'm here with Cody Nelson.
Hi guys.
And today's episode we'll be talking about the Marine Corps, we'll be talking about addiction, we'll be talking about recovery, we'll be talking about natural solutions, we'll be talking about war, and we'll also be talking about our friendship. Cody and I go way back. He was the first person actually that I met when I moved to Arizona in 2004. I was straight out of the U.S. Navy, and Cody was fresh out of the Marine Corps, I think like a month or so before and we've been friends ever since. Just a little bit about Cody. Cody is a U.S. Marine Corps Infantry Iraq War veteran, disabled vet. He's a father of two daughters, one stepdaughter and biological. He has a bachelor's degree in psychology. He's worked in corporate sales for the last 16 years and since he's left the Marine Corps. And he's also considers himself a drug addict in recovery, finding the way through natural and alternative approaches. So,
that's right.
Welcome to the show.
Trying to. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So I figure, we can go in so many different directions on this podcast that it might be best to just really start off with the Marine Corps.
Sure.
And, we might even go even before the Marine Corps a little bit, but what was your motivation to enlist? You were, 1999?
2000. Actually, I graduated high school in May of 2000 and always had drug addiction issues, or liked to party, as I would say, when I was younger. And an incident happened summer after I graduated, I would say in July. And 2 or 3 days later, after I sort of recovered, I walked into a recruiter's office, did the questionnaire, was honest with all my answers. Recruiter said, come back in a day and change your answers. So I did. And I left for boot camp August 1st, 2000.
That was quick.
It was. I wanted it that way. So I would say I joined the Marine Corps. My grandfather was a Marine. My father's brother was a Marine. I knew that I wanted to choose the Marines, and I knew I wanted infantry. I wasn't aware there was anything else, to be completely honest. But I knew I wanted to go quick because I was smart enough to know that things weren't going good. So drugs have always sort of been a thing in my past. Never really alcohol. It was always just hard drugs. Started with hard drugs, stayed with hard drugs, and sort of saw it as a path out of there. It was almost a crutch, actually. Not normally a crutch for most young men, but for me it was a way out.
Got it. And you were like a high school football star as well?
Star is an overstatement, but I was always a large, strong, fast. I was a good athlete, popular kid. That sounds so vain, but I had a great upbringing. My parents I had wonderful parents, older brother.
Dad's a good guy.
Yeah, they're great. There was no reason for the route that I took, other than I think sort of my personality. I've always been loud and center of attention, and I just got caught up in the fun of drugs. And so it was tough leaving because my family, I think they knew that it was for the better, but it was really tough. It was tough to go into the Marine Corps.
Were they happy that you enlisted?
Not at all. Not at all.
They wanted you to stay?
Yeah, there was no conflicts going on at the time, so I don't think that was the concern. I just think that my father, most importantly, I think, was afraid that I was just too kind of crazy and that I would maybe ruin my life by going in, not making it, potentially getting kicked out. He never said that, but that's my best guess. I remember the day I left, it was tough. It was really tough. When we went to the airport, it was hard, really tough.
So fresh out of high school, you enlist in the Marine Corps just a few months later.
Yep.
And you're on a plane headed to boot camp.
That's right.
Yeah, I remember those days too. And after boot camp, you guys have all seen, movies and different things like that about what military life is like in boot camp. Why did you choose infantry? I mean, you probably had a good enough ASVAB where you had lots of options.
That's a good question.
What were your thoughts on Marine Corps, being part of the infantry? Because I know there's a lot of pride in being part of the infantry.
There is.
I know they call people who are not part of the infantry pogues.
Pogues, right? Dirtbags. We a lot of things. I was one of the only Marines that never agreed with it because you're all in the same fight.
Yeah.
And when you need them, you want the folks there. But it was honestly just an ego thing. I like to say now it's pride, and it probably was. But I was that typical jock athlete, bigger, stronger, faster than the next guy. And I always enjoyed, not necessarily war movies. I think any common sense person is afraid of that. But at the end of the day, I would have to say, and it went through my mind many times, my mother, I remember, mentioned, like, you're going to do infantry? Why would you do that? And I did. I scored pretty high on my ASVAB. It was sort of a rite of passage for me maybe it was proving to myself that I could do it. But I knew that my disposition, my personality, I've always been a little off, wild, crazy. That was the thing. I mean, what better to be a United States Marine than to be a Marine infantryman? So it was the right choice. It was a perfect fit. I even stood out in the Marine Corps, put it that way. I've got it tattooed on my stomach. It says animal. Definitely earned that title.
What was training like? So where did they send you directly after boot camp? Where's the infantry training school?
So Marines do boot camp, and then based on your MOS, you go to a specialization school. Marine combat training is for non-infantry. School of Infantry, or SOI, is at Area 52 at Camp Pendleton.
That's right.
So you do 13 weeks in boot camp. You get 2 weeks off, and when I came home, it was my homecoming at my old high school, so I got to walk on the field, and the whole thing you see in a movie, it was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's cool.
School of Infantry was, in my opinion, harder than boot camp because it became real. It was like, oh wow, I'm really training with all these weapons. In boot camp you get to fire the M16, but 50 cals, AT-4 training rounds, things like that. So it was exciting. You do a lot of field time, and then you go off to the fleet. I think SOI was about 8 weeks maybe. I was in the fleet. I went to 29 Palms, California, which, if you think Arizona's hot, 29 Palms is hotter.
Yeah.
And there's nothing to do except drink and work out. And I was never a drinker, so I was always the guy that just got bigger and stronger, and they either called me meat or animal. And I'd go to the chow hall 6 times a day. But I fit right into the Marine Infantry.
Nice. And obviously shortly after you joined in 2000, September 11th, 2001.
Yep.
Happened, and then all of a sudden the nation was at war.
Yeah.
So you didn't necessarily get deployed right away for Afghanistan, so you missed that one. But just a few years later, you were right in the mix and called up for the Iraq conflict, which was, I think,
2003.
February 2003.
Yeah. It was weird. I think everyone remembers where they were on September 11th. I was in Japan on a 6-month pump. Marines do that about every 18 months. And I forget the time of day, but long story short, a Marine that was from New York City kicked open my door and woke me up and was like, oh my gosh, this just happened. And I was like, close my door or else, kind of thing. And I tried to go back to sleep, and 45 minutes later or so, Corporal Nan kicked open my door again and was like, oh my gosh. And again, I threatened him, and as soon as he shut the door, it sort of dawned on me what he said. And after some just epiphanies type moments where you're just like, whoa, is this really happening? By that time, our company commander had already come into the barracks. We huddled up, had a quick, not safety brief, the opposite of a safety brief, and we loaded up to the armory, got our LAV-25s out to Camp Schwab Beach and pointed out all the barrels at open ocean, which at the time made no sense to me, and it still doesn't.
Sure.
But it was just to show readiness.
Yeah.
And then we jumped on a catamaran and went to mainland Japan, where Camp Fuji is, Mount Fuji. So we got to go out in town and do the Tokyo Roppongi thing, and that was neat. But I was frustrated. I was frustrated that we didn't do the Afghanistan part, because in my opinion, that made sense. Everyone was angry, everyone wanted revenge, whatever the words you would use. At the time, as a young man, it was revenge.
When you train to fight, you want to
Right,
fight. Yeah.
exactly. And you're like, we're missing it. What are we doing in Japan? But looking back on it, now that I know what I know and I feel the way I feel, and everything's supposed to happen the way they happen, we came home from pump, and we immediately started prepping for the Iraq War. At the time, we were unaware that it was the Iraq War, but I'm sure 04s and above, company commanders even probably understood or knew. So the next 18 months was, I think I returned from Japan in January or February of 02, and I left February 13th. We got to Kuwait on Valentine's Day of 2003. We spent, I think, 29 days in Kuwait, and we invaded either the night of the 16th or 17th of March, and that was pretty surreal. That was, I could walk you through the entire battle plan to this day. Bombing Safwan Hill, Army engineers cleared the routes for us. We're in full mob gear, and it was petrifying. As tough as I know that I am, or I say I am, when you're 19 years old, 20 years old, that was very surreal. Fortunately, the first few days were sort of light. There wasn't much combat. When there was,
because the shock and awe was happening at the same time, so it's a lot of fire from the air.
Oh yeah, that's why we win wars. We've got our Navy, which is probably the majority of it, and then our air superiority allows us that comfort. But I think on day 2 or 3 was the first time we took fire in a town called Audianawa, and it looked like Star Wars. That's all I remember. It was dusk, and you just seen green and red lasers going back and forth. And I remember it took a few minutes to realize what it was. You almost felt stupid for doing so, but I kind of stood there and was like, "Oh, this is happening." And from that point on, over the next several months, we got some pretty cool citations and awards. One is a PUC, a Presidential Unit Citation. We were in LAVs, which is a 8-wheeled tank, light armored tank, go like 70 miles an hour with a big main gun and all the firepower you kind of want unless you run into a tank. But we traveled all the way up to the northern tip of Iraq in like 3 days. We were Tabasco sauce in the eyes and snorting it just to stay awake, and we received a Presidential Unit Citation
Tabasco sauce.
Yeah, right out of the MRE, man, just bam, right up the nose, which was common for me, I guess. But it was a good time. I'm happy that I did it. The after effects or the thoughts that happen as you mature and you go through life. Some of it doesn't make sense. A lot of it still doesn't make sense, but still proud of it. And they're all good kids, everybody I served with. There's always the 1%, but you meet some of the best guys you'll ever meet. So I'm proud that I did that and extremely happy that I served.
So then you came back to the United States sometime in 2003.
Right.
Probably more towards the end of the year, is my guess.
I think in the fall.
Got it.
Were you there for 6 months, maybe 5 months?
And then transition into 2004. And by the summertime of 2004, you were getting ready to separate and get out.
I got out July 31st was my actual exit date for EAS. I think I took 60 days of terminal leave, which is if you save up your vacation. So I think I was out of there by June 1st, driving home.
Why did you choose to separate and not do another 4-year tour?
It's a really good question, and I've been asked this so many times in my life. I guess if I was going to tell the truth, there's 2 reasons ultimately. One, I knew our unit was going back not for about another year or so, because there's 3 LAR battalions. I don't think I was afraid to go back. That's not what it was. There was just something. I've always wanted kids. I've always wanted a family, and I think when I got home, the war worsened greatly.
It did get worse.
It got a lot worse. And seeing that on TV, I guess I'd be lying if I didn't say it was fear at all. I'm not superhuman, but I remember thinking to myself, like, oh man, I just want to get out, have a normal job. I felt like I had done my duty. I wasn't going in for 20 years. I knew I didn't want to do that. So I used it as an opportunity to get out. I was pretty banged up. Had knee surgery, had to get a back surgery afterwards.
Was that immediate, like the knee surgery?
Knee surgery was, so we returned in the fall of 03, and the winter of 03 was my knee surgery. More along the lines just deterioration. I was 275 pounds, mostly muscle. I'm 270 right now, but I was a big Marine, and hiking with a 100-pound ruck or going on 10-mile runs. I could do 20, 25 pull-ups, no problem. I was a very different specimen, but it takes its toll on you, man. That's not meant for, in my opinion, it's not meant for 270, 280-pound guys. So
plus getting in and out of the
getting
vehicle.
Out of an LAV with, they call me Baby Huey when I had my helmet on, because I'm a big, goofy-looking guy. But flak jacket never fit, helmet never fit. Just looked like a comedy movie.
Nice. So Baby Huey gets out of the military and comes back. You didn't decide to stay in California. You came right back to the desert, your hometown. You're from Chandler, Arizona, right?
Yeah.
Born and raised out here, Mesa, I think.
I was born in Mesa, basically grew up in Chandler. And the one one part that I just forgot to mention, if I'm being completely honest, is I know that I wanted to get out and get a civilian job, but I missed partying. I know that now, and when I look back, I probably knew it then, but I was always involved with the wrong crowd, always doing, fun but bad things or illegal things, and you can't really do that in the service. You're, drug tested all the time, and as upsetting as that is to admit, I knew that was probably a big driving factor of why I wanted to get out. Not just the drugs and alcohol, but it was, I want to be free. I want to do what I want when I want, and that's kind of always been my personality.
Military's got a lot of rules.
A lot of rules.
Yeah, a lot of restrictions, a lot of rules, and obviously if you want to party and if you're going to take drugs, then it's going to...
Expect to get kicked out.
It's only a matter of time.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, just in my time in the military as well, I saw a fair amount of people that I knew actually get kicked out.
Oh, yeah.
They would go on deployment, they would come home, and they would get mixed up, and then before you know it, they got popped on a drug test on a Monday morning. And
shackled up.
Yep, and they were on their way out. So it was only a matter of time.
Yep.
So you figured, I'm just going to get out.
I got very lucky. I picked up sergeant at just over 3 years, and in the Marine Corps infantry, that's actually pretty unheard of. So for me to get out as a sergeant in the United States Marine Corps infantry, made it back from a tour of duty in Iraq, it was just the right time. It just went, okay, I did my time, I got something to be proud of, let's go back to what I was doing before. So looking back, it's upsetting, but I'm pretty sure that had a lot to do with it.
And they, I'm sure, tried to keep you in.
Oh yeah, they do their best, and they should. I was good at what I did. So I imagine for the infantry, losing not just me, but any guy like me, very athletic, not afraid of anything, the crazier the better, that's the perfect infantry Marine. So, but they respect the fact when you go, no, I'm good. The officer, I forget their names, but the re-enlistment package people, they do their work just like any sales job, but I was pretty close with him and was just like, no, I'm getting out. And I got out. I came home to Chandler, Arizona to live with my dad for a little while. And then I think I got my own place. I started at University of Phoenix September of 2004, right? And I got out in June. So by then I had my own place, and that's when I met you.
So when you get back to Arizona, let's transition into the addiction part, drugs and painkillers specifically. I knew that came a little bit later on.
It came later, yeah.
But early on, it really wasn't painkillers.
No, it's funny. Well, not funny, but in high school, that was always a thing. Football players especially would pop a Vicodin or a Percocet and drink a beer. And I remember Oxycontin, the 80s, the pure ones that you could smash up. I never done one. I never did one. I maybe took a Vicodin 3-4 times in high school with a 2 beer, 3 beer, never an alcohol. I always had hard drugs, cocaine, and never shot heroin, but it was always mostly cocaine. And when I got out, I was in a lot of pain. I immediately started getting seen by the VA. Painkillers were prescribed. I didn't really use them. Got involved into the psychiatric medications for PTSD and other issues. But really, cocaine was my thing again, and alcohol now, unfortunately. I was a little bit older. I think the pride and the image of being a war veteran, I think young men really, I still do to this day, to be honest.
People get caught up in it.
Yeah, I got caught up in it. So I was almost entitled, like, I deserve this. I'm allowed to do this. You feel really invincible. And that's scary.
I can relate.
Because you're doing something great for the country. You should be proud of it. You've earned a lot of respect. But at that age, I don't think you understand, you're misusing that sort of respect. And so I let loose. I got worse with drugs and alcohol than I had ever been right after the military.
And with your injury, so you had a knee injury, you had a back injury, diagnosed PTSD, it was probably pretty easy to get your hands on prescription medications of really any kind.
It was. The VA was actually the more difficult program to get into. Highly monitored. You could get it, especially with my injuries. I could easily get them. But they were very structured of, if you got 30 pills for 30 days, you don't go back till day 30 before, and that's the way it should be. It wasn't until I had met a friend through my employer years later. It wasn't until 2009 when I started a job at GoDaddy.com was the first time that I took pure oxycodone, a 30 milligram oxycodone. And that 10 minutes after I took it literally determined the next 6-7 years of my life. It was the ultimate euphoria. It was the ultimate mood booster. It was the ultimate everything. It numbed all the bad and amplified all the good. A lot of people think that painkillers makes you very calm and tired, and they do, except when you get into the higher dosage amounts. A lot of people, it's the opposite. It's an upper, and I was sales, so it really supported not only my professional career, but my personal life. It was fun, and it was fun for about a year, and then I realized,
because you were pretty functional.
Oh, you can be high functioning. You can be, and rather than even list, I mean, I was spending $1,000-$1,500 a week on my habit just for painkillers. But really, what opened my eyes into it was about 4 weeks into using my first pill. I'd gone to an acquaintance's house to buy some, and he had been using for years, and I watched him crush up 5 or 6 pills that I'm 290 at the time, and one 30 milligram pill was just whoa. And I watched this guy crush up 5 or 6 of them, and he's smaller than I am, and snorted them. And I'm ready to call 911, expecting this guy's going to die. And I'll never forget the way he said it too. He had a smirk one side of his face, and he said, "Give it a couple months, man. You'll be right where I'm at." And I don't think it was a warning. I think it was like proving like I can do this much. And I remember thinking to myself, like, what an idiot. And before I knew it, I was waking up to 5 or 6 30s a day. Throughout the day, I'd use another 5 or 6, maybe sometimes 10. There were days where I would use 30 30s and 10 80 extended releases, mixing that with somas, mixing that with Xanax, mixing that with my psychiatry meds. Not really, still, never really a lot of alcohol, but cocaine was still mixed in there. And when you start putting out all that together, anyone that's watched a documentary or a movie knows that's a recipe for disaster. And thankfully, I don't know why, nothing terrible ever happened to me. And that was sort of my motivation to stop. But that went for 6 years. And then I sucked treatment at a methadone clinic. I had tried the wean. I had tried all these.
Quick question for
Sure.
you. So with increased doses and your body's just building
Tolerance very quickly.
Tolerance very quickly for it, but it's got to be paying a toll on your body at this point. In different areas of your body, physically. Were you still working out, or did you get away from that?
I guess I was working out here and there, and that's another thing too, is I've always just been a muscular guy, and I was very muscular when I got out, and myself and others never really saw that big of a change. And so I think, and it's no one's fault but mine, but I think what really might have helped is if someone had seen me drastically lose a bunch of weight. My girlfriend, who I'm still with to this day, definitely saw the mood swings. People close to me, unfortunately. My daughters, my family, my mother and my dad. But other than that, if you just saw me, you would never be able to tell. But yeah, muscle deterioration was probably happening. More joints, all the things that matter.
Aches and pains.
And it takes a while to figure it out, because if you think about it, as it's deteriorating, you also have 1,000 milligrams or 500 milligrams of painkiller in you, so you don't notice it. And actually, it wasn't until, almost a year, maybe 2 years ago, where I really started to notice what that damage did, because now I can feel everything. And, I take it as I'm paying a toll for my past transgressions, if that's the right word. But, yeah, I think it masks what it's doing to you, because they are so powerful. I mean, 280-pound guy taking a tablet as big as half a piece of bubble gum for 6 hours, you are just in the best place in the world. Well, what I thought was, but the way you feel, you didn't feel anything. And when you start taking 20 of them a day, I mean, what are you going to feel? So it definitely took its toll, more psychologically and more on my family, probably, my relationships.
Of course. And you mentioned an interesting word there, which was feel.
Right.
So what's the reaction that you had with the feeling So did it make you feel more or feel less?
That's a really creative way to put it.
Because sometimes I see a lot of like habits when it comes to anything, right? Alcohol, painkillers, any sort of drugs. It's a lot of numbing. It's like you don't want to feel the emotions, so you just kind of can pause them essentially. Was it the same way for you, or was it more, you felt more actually taken?
I think that if you had asked me when I was using, I would say that it was to feel more. Because again, my experience with opiates may be very different than anyone watching or any loved one. And, I apologize, I'm not trying to glorify it, but it was just this amazing euphoria. And I was always an adrenaline chaser, a high chaser. But looking back on it now, it was absolutely numbing. It was, can you really function outside of the Marine Corps? You leave the most regimented, structured environment where you're told what to do, or you know what you're going to do every 10 minutes on the 10 minute of all day long. And you kind of put into this world of busy, money. I was making $500 after taxes every 2 weeks in the Marine Corps and living a damn good life. You get out and got an apartment's $1,200 a month, a car's $300 a month.
Bills start to add up.
Yeah, so I think it was a little bit of both, but now that I've matured and I can look back on it, it was mostly numbing. It was confusion, fear, PTSD, more anger, not PTSD, anger about as I started to mature and watch what was happening in those conflicts. Regret is the wrong word, but there's a lot of frustration about what we did and why we did it. Still support it, got to support the troops, but when you start to see the bigger picture of things from the outside, it was really eye-opening.
You can support the troops, but you don't have to support the politicians.
That's right. Oh, I don't support politicians.
Because they're the ones who get us involved in these wars.
They are. They're lining, Well, we won't go down that road, but I agree.
Yeah. So, at a certain point through all of this chaos, right, of partying, of, the doses increasing, you kind of got a gift from God and had a little baby girl.
That's right.
And what year was that?
She was born in 2006. So,
which was right in the heart of a lot of your heavy partying.
It was right in the heart of a lot of heavy partying, not with opiates yet. Right after I got out of the military, I had met my daughter's mother. Comes from a Midwest family. They're pretty wealthy. They've got some good money, and being young and as crazy as I was, I definitely took advantage of that situation. She's an amazing woman, a great mother. I just wasn't fit for any relationship, and we divorced in 2009, ironically, and I think in April of 2009, and then I started in August of 2009 at GoDaddy. So, but I was partying heavily with cocaine and alcohol and pot. When my daughter was born, that's the best day in any father or mother's life, but what was shocking when I look back now is even that gift that I had always wanted, even that wasn't reason enough for me to sort of make those changes. So, there's a lot of regret there, but I don't own a time machine, so I can't fix that. But that is what really opened my eyes later of like, how could you do that? You got everything you wanted. You had a beautiful wife, you had a great life, you had your kid you wanted, good family, veteran, served your country, all these great things, and then it, just shows the power of drugs and addiction.
And she's a gift because I'm sure in some of your darkest moments, like you really could hang on to her as an anchor to know that it's important to be here and that you need to be here, and that probably was maybe a driving force to help you to get away from the addiction and back into a better place.
It is, or it was, and sadly I will admit that those dark moments, the last thing that you want to think about are your closest loved ones. It almost feels disrespectful. Anyone that's watching that's been through similar probably knows what I mean. But you're right. That little ray of light, or oh my gosh, what am I doing? And typically that was at the end of the night when you knew you were greatest at risk for something terrible happening. You'd get upset. And be like, what am I doing? But with the that's when hard drugs stopped, was after her mom and I split, cocaine, etc., alcohol, and then that's when opiates came in. And tinkered around here and there still with hard drugs on opiates, but it was mostly just about the opiates. And at that point, my daughter was living in Iowa, and still is, with her mom. So I probably honestly used that as an excuse to continue doing what I was doing. And I definitely felt like, well, these are prescribed, some of them, and I'm buying the other ones, but it almost made it okay. I know that sounds like a cop-out, but there's definitely a line that gets drawn in your mentality of, well, doctors prescribing me these. I'm injured vet, this is okay. And then before you know it, it's got its hooks in you, and I don't know anyone that successfully got out with without some sort of opiate treatment, methadone, Suboxone, etc.
So let's talk about that. Let's transition into your way out, how you got detached from those hooks inside of you that kept you coming back.
Sure.
And then we'll start talking a little bit about where you are now and the different types of therapies and treatments that you've been using to keep you in that state of recovery. So what was the transition like? Did you just have like that one day where it's just like, I had enough, I got to do something? Or did you have a few of those?
Many of those. Anyone that's had opiate issues would know that the withdrawal there isn't words. It's the most difficult thing I've ever been through, and it may not be for some others, but it's by far.
I've heard that.
It is very difficult. So you get caught up in this cycle of, if you could just make it a few days without taking one, you're telling yourself you'll get clean. Well, that's not true. How much you use, how often, the frequency, how long you've been using, that all plays a role in how quickly you can wean off or come off. I hear these stories that people cold turkey it, and good for them. They deserve an award. That was not going to be me. I was always making good money, never lost my job, so was always able to make good money to support the habit. But after the 100th or 200th time of like, wow, this really needs to end, what really did it is, I think, over 5 or 6 years, there's probably 3 or 4 deaths, friends or acquaintances or in that circle.
Yeah.
One of which really hit home. His daughter was sort of friends with my 2 kids. My biological's Jersey, she's 14, and then my stepdaughter, who's my girlfriend, she's 18, but girlfriend's daughter, sorry. But my friend Joe, both my kids had hung out with his kid, and his kid was just a sweetheart. And he had a massive drug problem, and the way it came down the line to me was she had found him, and that broke me. Gosh forbid my daughter. I can't even repeat the words, but that was very eye-opening, and that still didn't get me to stop completely. That whole crew of people, I started to really observe, and I watched these amazing men. Most of them were men, almost all of them, and some of them were senior directors or vice presidents of large organizations. And I watched them go from that, deteriorate over a year, to losing their jobs, repossessed cars, divorcing their wives and losing their houses. And these are successful guys that I respected a lot. And I did. I got many of them into it, which I have a lot of regret for as well. I mean, we're all grown men, but there was a lot of emotion involved in all of it. So one day I just had enough for the last time, and thankfully my brother's dear friend from high school had been suffering from opiate issues and went into a methadone clinic, and I reached out to him. And he said, his name's Chris, he said, I'll be there tomorrow morning at 4 a.m. I'll pick you up. And sure enough, at 4 a.m. he was outside. You have to end dock at 4:30. They make it very regimented on purpose. And by 5 a.m. I was talking to a counselor. By 6 a.m. I was talking to the doctor. By 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. I was taking my first dose, just a little liquid drink. And then you have to go every single day. And a little drink of water with methadone in it, and you go to work and you live your life. But you don't go on vacations. You can't use drugs. There's a lot of rules to follow, but that was my way out. And although it is a crutch, and many people would say that because it is
it kind of has a bad rap, right?
It's an opiate.
The methadone.
It's a long-acting opiate. But at the end of the day, if I hadn't, number one, it had Chris to take me in there. 2, the clinic didn't exist or that drug didn't exist, I know I wouldn't be here.
How do you wean off the methadone? That's a process in itself.
So the challenge with methadone, and again, I'm just speaking from experience. I'm not a doctor, but I'm pretty sure the doctors will tell you the same thing. Methadone is stronger because it lasts so long. The half-life is longer. And I've heard things that it actually gets its way into your bone marrow. So the withdrawal can last 3 to 5 times as long, meaning months rather than weeks. So, and they put that fear of God into you, like you don't want to miss a day. And I did miss a day twice in 5 years or 6 years, and it's the most excruciating thing you'll ever go through. So you make sure you get to the clinic every day. But rule of thumb is typically 1 milligram a week or 1 milligram every other week. I never went above 55 milligrams. There's people at 200, and they've been on it for 30 years, which means they'll never get off of it. I specifically stopped, I think, at 55 or 57, plateaued and stayed there for, 2 years before I said, okay, 1 milligram a week. And I made a few mistakes the whole time because if you didn't feel good, you couldn't go to work. So if you had them come down and it didn't work, you'd go in and see the doctor the next morning at 4:30 and say, that's too much.
What's withdrawals? What did they feel like for you? I've heard people, making references to the sweats,
in your skin and
cold.
You can't get warm and you can't get cool. So when you're sweating, you turn the air conditioner all the way down, you strip down to whatever you don't need to wear, and then you get freezing cold because you're sweating the cold air. It's just this vicious cycle. Sleeplessness, insomnia is insane. I've always suffered from that since I got out of the Marine Corps, but this is something different.
Next level.
Bugs in your skin, scratching, flu-like symptoms, watery nose, diarrhea. Vomiting is very common. That, in my experience, which I never experienced heroin, but that's normally with heroin.
Sure.
But I do know plenty of people with just opiates that were vomiting and diarrhea often. Mine was more flu-like symptoms and just lethargic beyond all measure. Not going into work for a week, having to get doctor's notes written by friends, like ways to try to stay in the society while functioning, and it is the most difficult thing that I've ever had to do. So my crutch, I'll admit it, but it saved my life and it made it that much easier. And the regimen, you had to take your analysis, you had to see your counselor once a month, you had to see the doctor.
So there was like an accountability piece that really helped.
Yeah, and every day you had to, thank goodness it was close to my home. I could drive up the road about 5 miles, hit the clinic, drive down the next road for 5 miles, go to work. But there were people getting bused 20, 25, 30 miles away from the clinic every day.
Wow.
That's how important it is. And some people just like to get high.
It's life or death.
It can be, depending on the dose you're at. But yeah, for me, it was literal life and death, because if I didn't do it, I knew I didn't have the willpower to quit. No way.
Now, pharmaceutical addiction in this country is excuse me, bless you. Pharmaceutical addiction in this country is, it's a problem. It's a big epidemic. Why do you think that is? What do you think it is about American culture or our society or the way society is set up that draws so many people to want to escape the reality that we live in?
I can't speak for everybody, but I'm pretty sure I can hit this one right on the head. Is life's tough. Life's also beautiful. Life's wonderful. Happiness and joy.
And we have so much here.
We do. I just think that day by day it's becoming harder for the masses to see because of how much negativity we're surrounded with. War is just one example. In fact, in my opinion, that's not the thing that challenges us the most. If you just paid attention to how people treat one another in the masses, it's very concerning. So I think instant gratification of technology, being bombarded by the media, financial issues is probably the biggest one. Alcohol and drugs is an easy, quick way to just kind of forget about things. You see on the talk shows, a woman comes home, men too, but grab a glass of wine as soon as they walk in. A man comes home, grabs a beer. That's been going on for a very long time.
Sure.
Now narcotics, whether prescription or illegal, are so readily available.
Availability.
Readily to be honest, in my opinion, they're readily acceptable.
They are. Because the doctor prescribed it. You get a free pass.
And even that, with hard drugs, in the 80s growing up, you're an 80s baby or 70s baby, late 70s, early 80s. It was, cocaine was like, oh my gosh. When the Lawrence Taylor thing happened, and it was like cocaine. And then when I got older and started doing it, it was like, what? This is, and I think it's even worse now. I think maybe the young generation now knows better, but yeah, it was just an everyday thing. It's, readily available. But I think that society has created, everyone wants to get numb. And when I say everyone, I don't mean everybody, but the majority.
We're numbing all in different ways.
Yeah.
To one level of extremes or not. A lot of overstimulation as well.
Anxiety issues, common is Xanax or anti-anxiety Klonopin. Those exist, in my opinion, for very good reason. For panic attacks. I had prescriptions for them. I took them every day, right? And my doctor knew that, and I'm not blaming my doctor one bit, right? I'm a grown man. My doctor said, do you not feel good? Here's what I can give you to make you feel better. That's their job, in my opinion. Maybe not right, but anxiety, I feel, is the majority issue with everyone.
What about our medical system? And I know it's kind of a sensitive topic, but it seems like our like when we look at healthcare, it seems a lot like it's medicine care. The comment you just made was, you're not feeling well, here's something to replace
pill,
that. Versus let's figure out why and try to. I mean, I don't want to point the finger at pharmaceutical industries and doctors or anything like that, but they also don't have the time as well. Like, to get someone to change their behavior or change their habits is a really difficult thing to do. To create, new routines, discipline, exercise, diet, all the other things that go into wellness, feeling well. So they don't necessarily have the time to devote to that change, but so a lot of it's quick, here's something that's quick.
Like a great example is, I had a pretty major back surgery, and thankfully my employer gave me time off. FMLA is what it's called, or ADA, one of the two, and that's for a specific amount of time, and you're not getting paid on most of it.
Yeah.
Well, with a back surgery, you're talking about a year of physical rehab, 3 times a week.
Yeah.
Well, tell me how any American that's functioning in our country right now, with how expensive everything is just to live, how can you possibly make that work? I didn't have 3 kids at home and a wife, but I can only imagine some man or woman who gets a major back surgery and has 3 kids at home and the bills are through the roof. How could you possibly do that?
Don't have the downtime to recover.
Right. So here's a pill, and I don't need it, and that's exactly what I did.
Right back to work.
Right.
Yeah, I did the same thing. I had a neck surgery in 2006 or 7. I forget now.
2006, I think.
Yep. And I had my neck surgery. It's called an anterior cervical. They go in, they cut your throat open, they move your esophagus to the side, and they remove discs in your spine, and then they fuse them with. Actually, they take a bone from a cadaver, and they allow that to fuse with your own bone in your neck. But in the meantime, while that fusing process is occurring, which I think it takes about a year or so, they drill your spine with titanium. So I have a titanium plate to this day, because obviously they don't go back in to remove it because it's such a big surgery. And I remember the same thing. It was about getting back to work so I can continue to get paid because the bills are coming. And I was also a student at the time going to school, so I had like schoolwork that like needed to be done. I didn't want to get left behind, but that's just like my own. I could have easily taken a pause, but I didn't.
Coulda, shoulda, woulda.
Yep, and it was all about medication. I didn't make my change into the whole natural world of medicine until about a year after my surgery. I started to experience all of the difficulties again, the neurological problems, the muscle spasms, the physical pain, the numbness, the throbbing pain, the sleepless nights, the anxiety, and everything else that comes with that. And when I went back to my surgeon, they recommended I do another surgery, which they were going to fuse both above and below where I already had fused, and I did not want to go through that process again. And for some strange reason in my heart, it just told me there's got to be another way. And I told the surgeon no, and that I would explore alternative methods, and that really was the start of my journey. And that's when I started exploring all the alternative methods. I was like very anti-medication. If there was a medication that I needed, I would do my very best to find a natural solution. I would like research, okay, what does this medication do? Where does it come from? What's the purpose of it? And then try to find some natural solution. And I really got into that. And I think that's what like stimulated a lot of my learning and everything in this field.
I remember when you started getting into that, like most people, I remember thinking to myself, what's Mike doing? Just take a Whelp or a Tylenol or something. No, I'd take this natural Tylenol. And going, oh, good. I thought it was a phase because you had done your research and you really started to become absorbed in natural medicines. And for a guy like me, especially with my past, I'm like, oh man, take an Oxycontin, do something. And you were always the guy going, oh man, I remember that. You were one of my friends that was, we still hung out and we were still friendly, and you probably judged me, which you should have. But well, you should have, right? You should have been like, wow, this guy's got an issue. But you never really were. You weren't really ever involved in any of that, and that's probably why I gravitated towards you. You were one of those friends, whether I said it enough or not, was I knew I was safe with you because I knew you didn't want to go do what this other group would do.
Sure.
So, but that ended up creating a lot of bad karma, because the good friends, it's almost like I'm using them. Like, hey, let me use you when I need you to be safe.
Sure.
And then I'll go give all my time and attention to the bad ones. And there's a lot of regret involved with that too. But again,
I had a stint with painkillers.
I remember that.
Yeah, post-surgery.
Yep.
I'll never forget your wedding.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. My wedding in Iowa.
Yeah, your wedding, which was weeks after my surgery, and I had a stint with painkillers and anxiety medication, and I was on a ton of anti-inflammatory pills, muscle relaxers. So I was in that loop of, I need a muscle relaxer to calm down at night, and I wanted the painkiller at certain times, and I remember it used to make me really chatty.
Oh yeah.
Same thing. A lot of people.
That's what I mean.
A lot of people talked about painkillers numbing you and calming you down.
No.
It made me really chatty.
Right.
And
inhibitions go away. You become kind of like more fun.
Yeah.
And I got addicted to that.
Yeah. So I went through that phase, and it scared me. It scared me because I liked it and I liked the feeling, and I was able to back out of it. I never forget the way I backed out of it is they sent me home with this thing. It was a liquid hydrocodone.
Oh yeah.
Do you know what that is?
Oh yeah.
And it's
liquid hydrocodone or codeine.
Codone.
Well, there's both of them, but codone is
really powerful stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's the promethazine codeine, the purple drink. That's one that's used, and then liquid hydrocodone is typically like a liquid Vicodin. But the liquid delivery system, rather than a pill, is almost instant, and it is a little bit more euphoric, but shorter acting. But yeah, that will turn you up real quick.
They sent me home with that, and I had a good sized bottle, a good supply, and I tried it once, and it worked. And for some reason, I just said, I don't need it.
Good for you.
Yeah, I don't need it. I pushed it away. I was recovering, and I had this throbbing pain that was just killing me. It was just throbbing pain in my neck from my surgery. It was bad. But I don't know what it was. I couldn't tell you, but something kept me away from going towards that. And I had unlimited access.
Yeah.
So I cut it off early enough, where I was only using it for maybe about 8 months or so. And all the different medications, 8-9 months, and I was able to back off from it. So
that's good.
Yeah,
that's tough to do, especially when it does work. It does what it's supposed to. That's why I think doctors and physicians are in such a tricky spot. When someone tells you they're in pain, and you do an X-ray or an MRI, even if those things come back negative, if your job is to help someone feel better, at what point do you go, sorry, I mean, I'll help you, I'll give you some painkillers. But I think that obviously got abused heavily, and people, including myself, would say the pain was worse. But there's also phantom pains when you get addicted to painkillers. Yeah, you could feel a 10. There's no 10 because you literally can't feel anything, but in your mind it's telling you that you need these bad. So it's a double-edged sword on both sides.
I had a really bad night once. It was like a night that could have been like life-changing for me. And the next day I remember waking up and saying, I got to do something different. And I remember I just walked around the neighborhood, which, you don't walk anywhere here,
right.
In Arizona.
Cement pad.
Yeah, you just drive everywhere. And I remember walking for hours and like thinking and talking on the phone and all that kind of stuff. And first thing that actually got me to start to explore like a different way was a book called The Mind-Body Prescription by Dr. Sarno.
Right.
And that was like the opening gate for me, because it started to explain these questions that I had that I couldn't quite figure out, which was like how my mind, or the busyness of my mind, or the stress in my mind, or my anxiety, or whatever I was doing, I felt like I had this amazing machine that I didn't have the directions to. I didn't have the operations manual on how to run this thing, and it was running my life. And it started to give me some clarity about the mind and psychosomatic pain and how it manifests itself in the physical body.
Yeah.
And when I went on my journey, I started learning about like the present moment and all these kind of woo-woo terms, and I started following Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now, and A New Earth, and it was really helping me to understand that, oh wow, I have a lot more influence than I thought over my thoughts, and my thoughts don't necessarily have to run my day. So it spiked this giant curiosity, and then I started to go down that rabbit hole, and took the pause on the second surgery. And and that's just kind of been, that's really what kicked it off.
You're lucky. I mean, and you've always been an extremely smart guy. So, as one of your dear friends, I mean, I'm so happy that it happened that way, because it's not something I would wish on any loved one. My greatest fear is that not only as Americans, but as the whole world, if we don't get a hold on this prescribe,
Yeah.
right? And there's ownership on us as the patients too. Never going to take that away.
Yeah, same here.
My fear is I got 2 kids. One's going off to college in 2 months.
That's right.
My stepdaughter, and my youngest coming, living in Iowa, and her family's got a lot of money. I mean, typically that's a recipe for disaster when you watch TV, anyways. I mean, my daughter's a great kid. My fear though is when these kids go to college, like, I imagine I was crazy in high school, but I'm probably nowhere near as crazy as some of the guys.
What are they going to get exposed to?
Exactly.
Because everything's so readily available.
Yeah, I mean,
everywhere.
Adderall is huge. It always was, I think, when we were young, but I know 30 of her friends are like, I need an Adderall. I'm like, you're 16, what are you taking Adderall for? Well, the doctor prescribed it. I'm sure he did. I'm sure she did. Do you even know what it's for? And again, that's a real slippery slope, but I really fear where we're going to go if we don't slow this down. And there's so much out there. Not only have you taught me a lot with ice baths and Wim Hof therapy, etc. There's a lot of natural plant medicines. There's a lot of things that you can do to get an even better effect than some of the hard stuff out there. It's just not readily available, and it's not talked about often.
The movement's happening, you're right, and it's very much in its early stages. And I have a couple of questions I want to ask you too.
Sure.
I'm going to take out my phone, but yeah, the movement's happening. I think there's, there's like when there's a problem, we try to find a solution, and there's lots of problems in society, and there's a wave of kind of people like adopting these like natural modalities and getting really good results. And I saw that for myself. And I was like, well, if it worked so well for me and it was so effective to me, like, why wouldn't I share that? And that was another big part of the motivation of like getting it out there. And and people thought I was crazy because
I did.
Yeah, people like why would you take an ice bath, or why do you sit in the sauna? Sitting in the sauna can't do anything.
We live in Arizona. What are you doing?
Yeah, it's hot outside. Why would you want to go sit in the sauna? I heard it all, believe me. But I just kept going.
You did.
But I have some questions for you that I wrote down earlier before our interview. And really kind of like to know.
Sure.
So what would you say is kept you on the path of recovery versus checking out or staying high or numb?
I would have to say, I do want to say, because I mean it, my kids mean a lot to me. But I have to put an asterisk next to that statement and that's one of the main reasons why I want to do this interview, and I'm open with pretty much everyone I know.
Yeah.
It makes some people uncomfortable, but I'm like, my job now is to kind of tell everyone what could happen, and the discipline that's necessary to never go back to that. A friend of mine, or a girlfriend of mine, said, "You're an addict for life," and that really offended me when she first said that. But that's why I told you what I did is I'll always be an addict. I enjoy feeling euphoria. I enjoy feeling ecstasy, sexual pleasure, all those things, dopamine. All those things are so intense for me. But all I need to do is remember one of the 2, 3, 4, 5,000 mornings on a couch or laying in bed by myself going, oh my gosh, is my heart going to stop tonight? Or during the opiate epidemic of myself I wouldn't say suicidal, but the thought crosses your mind because you're in such a dark place. That sounds like the better alternative.
Sure.
I never got to that point where, but and that's scary to think, wow, you got a great life, you got great kids, you got a great family. And death is coming across your mind. That's how powerful this little pill is. Yeah. So what keeps me on the path is, my kids are older. I never want my kids to see me high. I'm sure they have before. And all I can do, I don't have a time machine. All I can do is be the best father I can now, be the best son that I can, best friend that I can, best brother that I can, trying to really make up for lost time. So that motivation sort of keeps me going. And again, some of the things I've been introduced to just by you and some of our friends, it's motivating. It's inspiring. It's, wow, I can just do this and get similar effects. Because I'm still fighting it. I know I am. I know I'm completely not back to normal. I know my brain doesn't operate at the level it should if I had never done any of that, but that's not a way to live life. So I'm doing the things that I can naturally, and gosh forbid, who knows, one day I could have a slip up. I think keeping that front of mind for me is super important, because I hear people say, I'll never do that again, I'll never talk to that person again. Yeah. And unfortunately, things happen. So I kind of always keep that fear near me and it causes anxiety. If you were to bust out an Oxycontin or an oxycodone right now, I'd be lying if I said, that doesn't look attractive.
Sure.
It's, can I stop myself from taking it? And that's a challenge I'm up to doing every day. But it's a fight. And I don't believe it's a disease, and I'm not trying to offend anybody. I think it can be a disease, but I think it's a combination of many factors. Being a popular sort of center of attention guy, self-image issues, there's a lot of things that combine to make the animal that is me. But one thing that I've admitted to myself is, you got a problem. You're always going to have this problem. And the best thing I can do is sort of separate myself from the people that I know don't respect me enough to keep that from me. I don't judge those that choose to use. I'll provide advice to people I love. But at the end of the day, people are going to do what they want. So it's up to me to hold myself accountable.
That's true. That's powerful. Thanks, you for sharing that. One last question for you. So, before we actually get into the last question, let's talk a little bit about what natural solutions have you started to explore, and what's been your experience so far?
Natural solutions, there's a couple different ways I guess I could answer that, but I'll start with the pain, because that's where the majority of my issues have come from, is pain, whether it be internal physical pain or emotional pain. Emotional pain is sort of just coming to the realization, again, I keep saying it, I don't own a time machine. Apologizing for things that happened 4 or 5 years ago to someone that you truly care about, they may laugh and be like, I don't even remember that.
Yeah.
But that's very healing for you. So it's very important that, and I have this tick. I'll be on my couch by myself and I'll flinch and make a noise, and my girlfriend will ask me, what is that? And she knows now after 11 years, but it's me literally having a bad memory of something. I did something terrible or said something terrible to someone, and it causes that much anxiety. That can only be solved or resolved by a phone call or hey man, you probably don't remember this, but this happened this time. I'm so sorry that happened. And the 99 times out of 100, you'll get a, don't worry about it. but the fact that I said it,
feels
it's
so
just
good.
thousands of pounds. So that's natural.
Feels really good.
That's the emotional pain.
Unresolved, hanging
Right.
around.
I mean, I've told my ex-wife on a couple occasions. I've apologized deeply, and it was very tearful from both sides. And afterwards, it was just this huge relief, because I feel like I did her wrong. I feel like I did my daughter wrong. So there's a lot of power in that. And then for physical pain, ice baths is something fairly new to me. A few months maybe, off and on, and I'm just now getting recommitted or committed.
That's right.
But I can tell almost immediately the euphoria is there, so it almost fulfills that desire for that feeling. And the science is there. I just recently completed your workshop a few weeks ago, and learning the science behind sort of not only breathing exercise to the Wim Hof therapy, but ice baths, etc., and the hot saunas. So knowing and watching you, I've had you as a role model to say, like, I know that you went through similar issues, very similar actually, and look where you're at now. So sort of kind of picking out the pillars to lean on of, like, look at Mike, look how much happiness and success he's found. And some of our other friends that are involved in other medicines or natural ways. It's inspiring. And when I started separating myself from the negative people and started surrounding myself around good, it's amazing what energies will do for you.
Yeah.
So,
we all know that, but it's hard to make that switch.
Yep.
It's
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Any mom, dad will tell you that. I mean, it's like the oldest thing.
It's
They
oldest
say
thing in the
you're
book.
the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. And I know from our conversation this morning too, in the sauna actually.
That's right, you just came into the sauna.
Yep, we were talking about resolving gut health.
Yeah, gut health.
That's like a new mission.
Yeah. For
the
me,
next step in your journey.
I think for me, one thing that I would admit that opiates probably cause a lot of problems. There's a lot of digestive issues. Constipation's a huge one, especially when you're using as much as I was.
And the Red Bulls.
Oh God. I don't know anyone to this day who used to drink more Red Line, Red Bull, Rockstar. 10, 12, 15 a day. More just even.
Did you hear that? 15.
Just
Red Bull or Red Line. What's stronger, Red Line or Red Bull?
Red Line is super dangerous.
They're like supercharged?
Yeah. But when you're mixing that with 20, 30 oxys as well, I look back and I'm going, why am I still here? And I'm not trying to get spiritual or religious, but there's got to be a reason. And I'm happy that I have that. I still have my loved ones. I still have my friends. Still a lot of repairing that's necessary or needs to be done, but that's the best case scenario that I could ask for is I'm still here. My friends and family are still here. But finding natural ways to continue is going to be super important. I'm only 38, and I always make jokes. Physically, I'm in my late 70s, and it is a joke, but it's true. I've got degenerative disc disease, titanium rods in my back. Now I think I need a shoulder surgery. I've had my knee surgery done. Arthritis in every inch of my body. I'm still a big guy. I haven't been to the gym in 9 years, but gosh knows what I'd look like if I still went. But I think at the end of the day, what I care most about is mental health.
Sure.
Which the things I just mentioned play a large role in.
Feeling good.
Yeah. Without the powder or the pill, and it is possible. It's just not as easy. So naturally, I think people go, I want the easy way out. And nobody I know wants to apologize to someone from 10 years ago. It's hard.
It's hard.
But I urge anyone watching this, that will be your best drug, is to just kind of surrender to, my father says it all the time, humility. It's something my dad taught me.
Surrender to humility.
Humility is the strongest word in my father's vocabulary. He says it all the time, that humility has taught him every valuable lesson in his life. And just kind of understanding, like, we aren't the most important. No one knows what's most important, but at the end of the day, what is important is the energies and the people we surround ourselves with. So humility and gratitude, obviously. Grateful to be here, grateful to still be friends with you, grateful to still be alive, but I earned every inch of what I'm going through right now. And all I can do is kind of just pay for it and try to teach others, like, you're not alone, first of all, unfortunately. Millions of people, not just opiates, every drug. And the only way it's going to get fixed is by spreading knowledge like you do here at Optimyze, or some of our friends that are involved in other sort of natural medicines. Just letting people know there's another route, and they work. They might not work as quick as a pill would, but if you put in the work, it does help.
Yeah, it's about, you have to put in the work, you're right.
Right.
To process, and you kind of...
A lot of process.
Unravel,
I've been doing drugs since I was 13. And when I say that out loud, a lot of people would think like, what are you, bragging? No, I'm not. What I'm saying is for 2/3 of my life this September, I've been not sober. And even further, that 1/3 where you're like 1 to 10, that shouldn't even count. So, 3/4 of my life, I've been under the influence of things that you shouldn't be. So expecting it to get fixed overnight is asinine. So you got to start somewhere, and that's what I'm doing right now.
That's awesome.
Thanks, man.
Well, I think you answered my last question.
Uh-oh.
So I had it all typed up, and so I think we covered a lot, and I hope all the viewers listening to this really connected with Cody's story. I know I have. I know Cody for years. He's like a gentle giant. He's like one of my closest friends, my best friend, like my brother. So I'm honored to have you here and share your story. It's powerful, and I know when you're in it and you're going through it, like you're just in that survival mode, and just something like a few months ago just kind of came about, and it was like, I think it's time for Cody to share his story. And I know you share it with people around you. You're never shy about that. But we really wanted to do this podcast just to get the information out there. Know that there's resources. Know that there's natural solutions. Know that it's going to take work. And that's it. So I'm going to have Cody's information in the comments below, so that you can connect with Cody on Instagram and Facebook if you have questions and you want to know more about Cody's journey, or maybe you need some support. And we're going to have this video up here soon, and we'll get it posted and have people tuning in so that they can hear this powerful story, and
Thanks, Mike.
just the authenticity of just how you share things, and you're just such a great speaker. So
Thanks, man.
I really appreciate it. I know it's not easy to unravel all that, and you did so brilliantly and beautifully. So
Thanks, man.
Yeah, really.
The only thing I would say is obviously thank you, Michael, and thank you to anyone watching this. But if I could say one message to anybody is what I just did with Mike. If you have friends or family members that are going through any sort of addiction, what I just referenced towards the end of how powerful that is to release some of those feelings, I urge you to just try to have the conversation. It's definitely worth it. It's important. So I appreciate everybody for listening.
And I love that piece on resolving those unresolved conversations and issues that are just hanging around, that eat you alive and keep you up at night. And just that phone call can make such a big difference.
The smallest memory for someone may be the greatest for somebody else, and that's hard to understand unless you're in that person's shoes. So like I said, the example of, hey man, I'm sorry what I did 10 years ago. Forget about it. Well, that might have been tearing me apart, and I'm numbing myself because of it, and that may sound silly to someone, but the smallest act of kindness, you can change somebody's life.
It goes a long way.
It does.
Excellent. Well, thank you, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you, guys.
Please make sure to give our video a like, share, and leave your comments below.